Welcome back to the channel, Think Outside the Board. I'm your host Brian, and today I'm presenting a first impressions video for Sleeping Gods, the new Ryan Laukat game that just delivered on Kickstarter. And this is not a full teach and review video, so I'm not going to explain everything about the game. I'm also not going to give you a full review. What I am going to do is show you just enough of the game as quickly as possible that hopefully it will give you what you need to decide when this thing hits retail if it's a game that you might want to acquire. So join me down at the table. I will show you the game and then we'll come back here and I'll tell you what I thought about it. So this is what a game of Sleeping Gods looks like when it's all set up. In fact, we are currently 5/9 of the way through a campaign. And the reason I know why we are that specific an amount through is that this deck, which is the event deck, has 18 cards, and it's divided up into 3 types of cards, and there's 6 of each. So there's kind of 6 of mild weather, 6 of stormy weather, and 6 of really bad weather. So each of these decks essentially has 18 events in it. You've got 6, 6, and 6 of each type of card. And you're going to go through this deck essentially 3 times, although each time you rebuild this deck, you're going to put different cards in it. Nevertheless, that means that in a campaign, you basically will have 18 plus 18 plus 18 for a total of 54 turns. And I know that we have gone through this deck once, and then a second time 2/3 of the way through. In other words, we've gone through 30 cards of 54. So that is 5/9 of the way through. Now, Sleeping Gods is, as you can see from this, it's just enormous on the table, and there's a lot of little fiddly bits. I'm not sure how much of this down here you're going to be able to see on camera, but there are resources, which I also have on this. There's vegetables and meat and wheat. There are also these materials, which are bricks, and these artifacts, which are hard to find, rare to find. But these are kind of realistic resources that are part of, I think, Kickstarter's stretch goal. So if you get this at retail, I'm assuming that you won't get these realistic resources. You'll just get cardboard tokens. Likewise, the metal coins here, I think, are just a part of the Kickstarter version. And so if you're getting it at retail later, you may just get cardboard punch tokens for the coins. Anyway, it's a lot to take in, and there's so much going on in the game, and it's so fiddly that it would be very hard, if not impossible, for me to simultaneously save my campaign and teach you. So I'm just going to show you a very quick demonstration of turns and the general gameplay with what I already have set up. So essentially, players will be taking turns back and forth over the course of the game. Now, this is the captain. You're going to have 9 characters in the game, so she is the 9th. There are 8 other characters, which you probably can't see. They're just off screen here. It's too big to fit everything on, but they're essentially more characters like her. So you get the captain and you get 8 other characters. Everyone can play the captain, but players divide out the remaining characters. So for instance, in a 2-player game, each of the players is going to play 4 characters plus the captain. In a 4-player game, each of the players will play 2 characters plus the captain. And in a 3-player game, 2 of the players will control 3 characters, 1 will control 2 characters, and then everyone will have access to the captain. So all the characters essentially look like this captain. So when I talk about things in relation to characters a little bit later while I'm explaining things, I'm just going to use the captain as the example for everything. A turn begins doing a ship action. There are 5 different places that you go on the ship. Most of the places that you can go will allow you to draw one of these cards. This is called the ability deck, and you're going to be using this for a lot of things in this game. So for now, I'm just going to put it right down here where you can still see it, but this is the ability deck. So most of the places that you can go on the ship here to do your ship action, which everyone will do at the start of their turn, will have you drawing probably one of these cards. And they all look like this. They have a fate number up here, an amount of command cost if you want to use it on your player board. So to do that, you would end up paying this command cost and slipping it under one of your 2 player slots. And then you would have ongoing use of this ability, and your character would also have use of this icon in addition to the other icons on their player board. And those icons will be useful when you are completing challenges. And the abilities are good just to do whatever the ability is. For instance, this one says you can discard this equipped card to skip an event card. So if you wanted to skip one of these, it looked really bad. But in general, you're going to take one of these per turn during your ship action, and you have a hand limit of 3 of these. So either you're paying these command cards to slot them under your character, or you can also discard these when you're doing a challenge to get a +1 if it's this type of challenge. This is the symbol for craft, so whenever you're doing a craft challenge, if you have this in your hand, you can always discard it to get a +1 for that challenge. So no matter where you go on the ship action, you're going to be taking at least one of these cards. You'll also be taking some command tokens. These are these blue tokens, which allow you to do various actions. And you'll be doing something else, and it's kind of variable from room to room. If you go here, you'll be going through these search tokens, which has resources that you might be able to get, but it also might cause the ship to take damage. If you go here, you'll be able to heal one of your people. If you go here, you'll be able to discard an ability card to remove a fatigue token. And whenever a player does a challenge, these are the things that require these icons, they're going to take one of these fatigue tokens and they'll just put it on the player board there. If they're ever taking part in a second challenge, they're going to take a second fatigue token, which means once they have 2 of these, they can't do any more challenges. So you're going to need to get these off. Also, once a player takes a second fatigue token, the second token will be placed side up, which means they will do 1 less damage in combat. So this is an ability that lets you discard one of these cards to remove a fatigue from somebody. If you go over here, you're going to remove 2 command tokens from various abilities. Those are these things that you're going to get every round. And one of the things you're going to use them for is to trigger the various abilities on a player board. And when you do, you'll just put these tokens on here to trigger the ability, and then you can't use any more player board abilities for that character until these have been removed. Over the course of the game, you'll also gain these adventure cards, and they'll work the same way, where you'll place a certain number of command tokens on them to activate whatever the recipe or skill or treasure or ability is connected to that card. And there's a space up here that will allow you to remove all of the command tokens across the entire game. But when you do that action, you will actually receive 1 less command token for your turn than you would if you did the action that only removes 2 of them. But every once in a while, you definitely will want to have someone go there just to get all the command tokens off so that you'll be able to use those abilities and spells and all that stuff again. Okay, so the first thing a player will do on their turn is they will go to one of these places on the ship. And they'll get a card, they'll get some command tokens, and they'll get some kind of bonus that's specific to the area that they've gone to. Then they will draw one of these event cards, and it usually has some kind of challenge on it that you have to participate in. So for instance, on this one, you need to fight off this Cryvern attack. And in order to do that, you need to do a strength test. So you need to get a strength of at least 8 to complete this challenge. If you fail, you're going to lose 3 health across all of your characters and take 3 ship damage. Or you can try to outrun this Cryvern by doing a craft challenge. The strength challenges use these red bicep icons, Whereas the craft challenges use these kind of cross tools. That's the icon for those. And normally in a challenge like this, you're only going to be able to use the characters that you have and the captain. So to use a character for a craft challenge, you'll place a fatigue token on them if they have the room for it, and then any of the appropriate icons on their player board will count towards the success. So if I had room to involve my captain here, and I was doing, let's say, a strength test, she has 2 strength icons. So if I put a fatigue token on her, I now have 2 going towards this strength test. Maybe I put tokens on a few other characters. So maybe I start with a total of 4 icons on characters that are going to count towards this test. So then what I'll do is I'll draw this card from the top of the ability deck. I'll flip it over. I'll look at that number, and I'll add all the character icons that I included in this test, and I'll add them together. So if I had put enough fatigue tokens out to trigger 4 of those strength icons, and we added that number to this, which is also 4, then I'd have a total of 8, and I would pass this test. If you pass a test, normally you get some kind of reward or something good happens. And if you fail a challenge, usually there's some kind of bad thing that happens. So again, every player at the beginning of their turn will do a ship action, and then they will draw an event deck. And there are 4 things that a player can do on their turn. And it's right here on the board. So the first is traveling. Traveling is how you move your ship. You can see right now we have this metal ship here that's on a section of the board, which is separated with a dotted line. So if I want to do the first player action, I can travel. And in order to travel, it will be a craft action. So just like with other challenges, I can put fatigue tokens on certain characters if I want to boost this craft action. And then again, I'm going to turn over one of these ability cards, and my travel number will be the amount of craft icons I triggered plus this number. And then if it falls in whatever range here, I'll be able to go that number of spaces. So if I drew a 0 to 3, I'll be able to travel 1 space. If I did a 4 to 6, I'll be able to travel across through another dotted line. If I manage to get a 7 to 8, I'll be able to travel 3 segments. And if I got more than 9, I'll be able to travel 4 segments of water. Now, let's say I was here and I went 1, 2, 3, 4. You can move from map page to map page. And when you do, you'll just flip the map to the next area. So when you do, you'll just flip this to the page that it tells you to. So this would go to here. And if I'm going off one side of the page, I can come in anywhere. So I could come in here, I could also come in there. And then I can keep moving my remaining spaces of movement, which if I had 4, this would be 3, and then 4 could take me over to here. So that is one thing you can do on a player turn. You can travel. You can also explore. And this is the main part of the game. This is the kind of storytelling part of the game. So when you're exploring, you'll trigger one of these locations in an area where you are, and you'll pick up a storybook and you'll read an entry. So this is, what the storybook kind of looks like. And it's huge. And there's lots of entries. And, you'll read a passage. It may have you do a challenge like this. You may get good things, bad things may happen to you. You don't really know. But the whole reason you're doing this, you're visiting places, is to be involved in this story and to search for totems. The bigger kind of storyline in Sleeping Gods is that players are trying to find these totems that have put the gods to sleep. So you may want to wake the gods up. You may want to try to keep them to sleep. You may just be trying to collect those totems. The specifics of your goal will kind of change depending on what you do in the game. So your overall goal could evolve a little bit. But you're essentially going to be reading these passages and making choices. And in that sense, the game very much resembles other Ryan Lawcat games like Above and Below and Near and Far. So you can also occasionally go to a market if you encounter a space with a coin on it, which is considered to be, here's one. It's considered to be a market. When you go to a market space such as this, you're going to take 7 cards off of this deck, and you'll be able to buy any that you can afford. Now, that means when you do that, you want to have lots of money. But those cards, which are adventure cards, will eventually end up going over here once you buy them, or they could be weapons, like this one. So these adventure cards, which you may be getting from that deck or as quest rewards, will allow you to do various abilities with command tokens. If you get weapons like this, a lot of times they're powered up from the player board's original weapon, and there'll be an accuracy number for combat, the amount of damage that they do, the kind of cards that they can discard from underneath their player board to increase their damage, and their block. So getting better weapons is always really, really helpful. But weapons especially can be very expensive. But that's what you do at the market. If you do a port turn, and you can only do that on major cities like this where there's the port icon, there are 4 different actions you can take in port. You can do all of them. One is to pay 4 coins to remove one of these fatigue tokens and 2 damage from every character. So that is a very, very efficient way to do a lot of healing and to get a lot of these fatigue tokens removed. And again, not having maxed out fatigue tokens is the way that you participate in challenges. So this game is going to be constantly a balance of getting in combat and taking damage and doing challenges and getting fatigue tokens and then finding ways to remove the damage and the fatigue tokens. So in port, that's one way you can do that. You can also pay 1 coin to heal any one character of all their damage. So if you have a character that has a lot of damage, that can be a good way to just remove all of it. You can also pay a coin or a resource to fix any ship damage that's on your ship, because if you ever accumulate ship damage in all 11 spaces, your game will essentially end. That will also happen if you ever have all of your characters take max damage, so they all essentially are healthless. If all of your characters are reduced to 0 health, the game will end. Now, one last thing that I should show you. If you go somewhere where you get in combat, this is a neoprene combat board that was part of the Kickstarter version. The combat will tell you a certain number and very specific enemy cards to put out. So let's say it told me 14 and 15 and 16. I would then take these cards, I'd shuffle them randomly, and I would place them on the combat board like this. Now, whenever you're fighting monsters, they're going to have an armor class. So you will need to beat the armor class of a monster to hit it with the value of your accuracy combined with the value of your ability card draw. So for instance, if I was using this weapon, which has an accuracy of 4, and I got this for my draw, I would have an 8 to hit, and I only need 4 to hit this eyeball, so it would hit. And then I would do the damage of the weapon, and if I had any cards with an icon underneath here that matches that, I could discard that card to do an additional damage. Now when you're placing damage, let's say I did 3 damage, I would be able to put a damage token wherever I want for every hit, except on hearts that have numbers that takes that number of damage to cover that heart. So if I had a 4, I could put 1 there, I could put 1 there, that's 2, and then 3, 4 damage, I'd be able to cover that up. If you ever cover up all of the hearts on the card, the creature dies. And then they have different abilities. Like this creature is winged, which means you need a ranged weapon to hit it. If you are using a non-ranged weapon, then it has an armor class that is 1 higher than what's on the card. However, if you ever cover that up, that ability goes away. You'll also have end of the round abilities where the monsters attack. And if you cover this up, those abilities won't trigger at the end of the round. And when you cover up these areas that have damage on it, when the monster counterattacks you, it'll do this damage plus any damage that's uncovered. So the more you cover up these damage amounts, the more you're reducing the supplemental damage that this monster will do. Finally, whenever you cover up something that has this little red diamond icon on it, you'll get to take your synergy token for the captain. This looks like this. And you'll give it to another character. And then when they land their attack, they'll be able to apply the effects of that synergy token. A lot of times it's extra damage, or it's block, or it could be extra accuracy. The captain's token actually allows players to place damage going by a diagonal, because normally when you're assigning damage like this, they're using this kind of interesting combat system called slash damage. So you always have to place damage next to an area where you've already placed damage. It can turn a 90-degree turn, it just needs to be adjacent. So normally you can't place with diagonals. With that Captain Synergy card, I could decide to place in diagonals, but only with that. Also, you can do interesting little movements where you do damage to one monster and then you carry over that damage to a neighboring monster, as long as you're kind of still going by adjacency rules. The only other rule there is that at least half the damage has to be on the monster that you start on. But that can be a really good way to get in some additional hits on an enemy with a really high armor class that would be hard to land a hit on, by attacking the monster next to it and then splashing damage over to the higher armor class monster. Now, anytime you attack a monster, once you've finished your attack, the monster will attack you back, and it will do the amount of damage here plus anything that's uncovered. If you manage to kill the monster before it can attack back, then it won't. So a normal combat round includes 4 of these combat tokens, and they're given out to the various players. So in a 2-player game, each player would get 2 of these combat tokens. And you could activate any character up to twice in a combat round. So for instance, one player could activate one of their characters one turn, then maybe the other character activates the captain and does an attack with the captain. If play goes back to that first player, they could attack with the captain again, because she can attack up to twice per combat round. And then if it goes back to the second player, maybe they attack with one of their other characters. After a round of combat, so after 4 attacks, all the monsters will attack. And they will attack with whatever they have available, including their end of round abilities, which generally puts negative status effects on you, which are kind of a pain to remove. But usually, once you finish the combat, you will get rewards that include coins and resources and experience points. Experience points can be used to purchase these cards, which are paid for with experience points and are kind of high-level abilities that, again, can be slotted underneath the character to give them bonus abilities. So that is it. On your turn, you're going to be moving your ship around. You're going to be going to places and doing various journal entries that may involve challenges or combat. You'll be going to the market to buy cards so that you have more supplemental abilities you can do for command tokens. And you'll be going to port to heal your people and buy some of those upgrade abilities. So that is essentially the game. It's going to take place as you run through this event deck. Each time you finish the deck, you'll form a new deck. On the 3rd time through, you'll complete your campaign. So the campaign will essentially be 54 turns, with each turn made up of a ship action, an event card draw, and 2 of these actions. And you can do the same one twice in the same player turn. So that is what Sleeping Gods looks like. If you join me back over on the other camera setup, I'll tell you what I think about it and some of the problems of how sprawling this game is with so many kind of fiddly bits. Okay, so that was Sleeping Gods. Now, I think the easiest comparison to Sleeping Gods is sort of a smoosh of Above and Below and The Seventh Continent. So it's got the same kind of narrative storytelling and kind of choose your own adventure decision making that you'll find in many of Ryan Laucat's games, like Above and Below and Near and Far. What makes this game a little bit different is the longer story and the long campaigns. And that's what makes me compare it to Seventh Continent. I think it is a lighter game than Seventh Continent. I think it's also not as difficult in areas, although it can be difficult. What I did not show you on the table is that you will also get this check sheet, which allows you to unlock certain things in the game and also shows you all the different things that you can collect over the course of the game. So, and also, when you are doing your campaign, you're going to be doing it on this log sheet. And so if you stop partway through, you can kind of put all the information in here and then hopefully reset it up later. Also on the back, this is probably the best part, there's an entire map of the world. Now, I think everything you see here is going to be in both Sleeping Gods and the Tides of Ruin, which is the sequel that came with the Kickstarter. So I believe there are certain areas on this map that are not accessible without Tides of Ruin. But I think this is for kind of the base game and the expansion put together. But they give you the ability here to write on all the different locations and cross it off if you finished it. Maybe, if there are keywords that you need to go to certain places, you might write that. But this is super helpful. Between the log and the kind of achievement sheet, you can keep track of things that you do over a campaign or multiple campaigns. So even a campaign, you're not going to finish everything that's in this box. It's going to take you, I don't know how many campaigns to be able to kind of do everything. I'm guessing 4 or 5 campaigns at least. And based on what I've played so far, I'd say a campaign's probably going to run you 20 or 30 hours. Yeah. I mean, maybe the more you play it later on, you can get a campaign down to 20 hours once everyone knows what they're doing. But I think when you're beginning, it's going to be a good 30 hours plus for a campaign. Now, some of that is reading, right? So if you're a slower reader, it's going to take longer. Some of it is just kind of figuring out little fiddly details. But there's a lot of game in the box, which is that's my point in showing you all of this. There's a lot of game in the box. There are multiple campaigns worth of material in the box, like 4 to 5 campaigns at least. If I compare this to, let's say, Gloomhaven, obviously it's not as long as Gloomhaven. It's not as crunchy as Gloomhaven. It's not as sort of punishing as Gloomhaven, but it is still a challenging adventure. Also, Dice Throne Adventures. I think, the difference between this and Dice Throne Adventures is that in Dice Throne Adventures, you are essentially going in and you're doing a dungeon crawler with Dice Throne characters, and you're using all of those mechanics with rolling dice and action selection tokens and things like that. This is much more about narrative storytelling, although there is a combat system. I showed it to you. I could also compare it to Waste Knights, which is also a very text-heavy kind of narrative storytelling book. I think right now I'm actually preferring Waste Knights to Sleeping Gods a little bit, just because I like the writing in Waste Knights and I like the theme a little bit more. This is a little more cutesy in a way, whereas Waste Knights is kind of more post-apocalyptic and darker. But my biggest problem with Sleeping Gods, now it's a great game. I want to establish that right now. It's a great game. I would rate it very, very, very high. It's not without its problems though. And the biggest problem, I think, is there is not a good storage system for Sleeping Gods. Their storage system essentially is throwing a lot of baggies at you and telling you to throw everything in a different bag and just throw everything in the box. So it's not, if this had like a good games tray system or a way to facilitate packing up the game when you wanted to save it and then putting it back out when you're done, that would help a lot. And I think part of the reason is that in a campaign, like I said, you're going to be playing these campaigns for probably 30 hours plus. So it's very hard not to just leave it on the table. And it's actually affected my ability to shoot a lot of other videos this week because we were busy playing Sleeping Gods and we didn't want to put it off the table because it was going to take so much work to remove it. And I finally did remove it, I think yesterday, and it took a lot of work. And I had to You get a lot of extra baggies, and it's a crazy, chaotic, baggy storage system. And I don't think it's helpful. I kind of wouldn't wish it on anyone. I think if you're going to play this game, you almost want to just leave it set up until you finish the campaign, which, like I said, is 30 plus hours. So that's not really feasible all the time. So I think this game needs a better storage system and a better saving system. Other than that, I like the game. Even with all the tokens and all the fiddliness everywhere, I still really like the game. And it's really compelling, and I'm a completionist, so I want to finish our campaign, which we are now 5/9 of the way through. I would really like to finish that campaign and do like 3 or 4 other campaigns. But I have other games I have to play, and I have a life, so I can't spend that much time committed to Sleeping Gods right now. But it is fun, and it's compelling, and it's calling to me. And I imagine that over time I will play enough campaigns that I can cross everything off of this. That is my plan. It just may take a while, and it's going to be hard to get it on the table and off the table. So from now on, when I play Sleeping Gods, I'm probably going to be trying to play it at least half a campaign at once, which is what we ended up doing the first time. But like I said, it just prevents you from doing almost anything else, and the save system is not very good. And also, there's 13 different endings in this thing, so I want to be able to see them all. But other than that, it is a fantastic, amazing, compelling game. It is really fun. It is really cute. The story writing and the journal entries are involving to read. And it plays very much like, an old school role-playing game or something you might play on like PS1 or PS2, and you're kind of traveling around the world and doing all these things. It just doesn't have the, easy save system that video games do in that kind of a world, in that kind of setting. So this is a game that I would very much recommend to most people, especially if you like Ryan Lawcat, especially if you like narrative games. Thank you very much for watching. I hope this was helpful to you. If this is your first time at the channel, please consider subscribing down below. You can always like the video too. And if you have any comments, post those down below and I'll try to keep track of them and respond to them fairly quickly. Also be looking out for my February Game of the Month video, which should be landing very soon as well. So thanks again, and I will see you